Hello again. Welcome to this week's video lecture for Biology 191. The topic is photosynthesis, and let's thank Jennifer Crossman again for some beautiful slides. Most of the energy consumed on Earth comes directly or indirectly from photosynthesis. Energy from the sun grows the plants that we eat, and if you eat animal products or if you feed them to your pets, they were raised on plants as well. Even oil, coal, and natural gas originated from plant sources millions of years ago. Chemoautotrophs are some of the earliest organisms on the planet. They transform inorganic carbon to organic carbon through chemical reactions. But one thing that we know from the study of ecology is that if there is competition for a limited resource, organisms will turn to alternate resources. What better, more abundant source of energy is there on the planet than the sun? Photoautotrophs evolved to harvest energy from the sun. They capture solar energy directly and they convert it to chemical energy, in other words, glucose. Most solar energy captured this way comes from plants, but there are bacteria, protists, and algae that are also photoautotrophs. We need to talk about how plants absorb light, so let's start by talking about light itself. Electromagnetic energy encompasses everything from gamma rays on the far left side of this illustration to radio waves on the far right side. The light waves that form the visible light spectrum fit right into the middle. They're sandwiched into the middle up there. Note that the shorter the wavelength, the more energy there is in the waves. X-rays have more energy than visible light, and within the within the visible light spectra, blue light has more energy than red light. How does a plant capture light energy from the sun? Plants use pigments to do this. Pigments are molecules within plants. They capture photons, which are discrete particles of light. As the photons are absorbed by pigments, electrons are excited, and they move down an electron transport chain. There are different types of pigments in plants, and each one has certain wavelengths that it is best at capturing. As I was just saying, each pigment absorbs light only of certain wavelengths. Only one pigment, chlorophyll A, can act directly to convert light energy to chemical energy. Chlorophyll A is known as the primary photosynthetic pigment. Accessory pigments capture light energy, but they send this energy to chlorophyll A. Remember that short wavelengths have the most energy. See in this figure that chlorophyll A, shown by the solid line, captures the shortest wavelengths of all the pigments. It captures blue light, and it also captures red light, but not really the green spectra. In fact, none of the pigments, the carotenoids or the chlorophyll B, do that well at capturing the green spectra. This green light that is not captured is reflected back to your eyes, and that is why you see plants as being green. Now, don't take my word for it that plants have these different pigments. One of the processes in lab that you will conduct is to extract pigments from leaves, spread them out on some chromatography paper, and see for yourself that they're there. Also for lab, you need to know precisely where in a leaf photosynthesis takes place. Look at the structure of a leaf from the large scale to the small scale. You know from previous labs that leaves have a tissue called mesophyll in between the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. In the mesophyll there are organelles called chloroplasts, and each chloroplast has an outer membrane and an inner membrane. The inner membrane is folded into stacks of discs. These are called thylakoids. The pigments and chemical reactions of photosynthesis are housed in the thylakoid membrane. Notice also this word here, stroma. Stroma is a semi-liquid substance that surrounds the thylakoids, and some of the processes of photosynthesis happen in the stroma. We'll come back to that. Now let's look at how the chemical process of photosynthesis works. Photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide from the air, plus water, plus light energy and creates glucose. The water on the left side of the equation, this is oxidized to give up free electrons. And the carbon dioxide that is reduced, it gains electrons lost by the oxygen from the water. The water on the right side is assembled from hydrogen and oxygen released during light-dependent reactions. In other words, the water on the left side of the equation is not the same water molecules as the water shown on the right side of the equation. What you need to know, first of all, is that the process of photosynthesis works in 3 stages. Make sure to know these. In stage 1, the plant captures energy from the sun. In stage 2, light energy is used to produce ATP and reduce NADP plus to NADPH. In stage 3, ATP and NADPH are used to synthesize glucose. The first 2 reactions are called light-dependent reactions. They can only happen in the presence of sunlight. The third reaction, as long as ATP and NADPH are present, can happen whether it's day or night. Doesn't matter. Let's look at light-dependent reactions. Light-dependent reactions capture energy from the sun and use it to produce ATP. ATP is the form of energy that cells use to do work, right? This process involves an electron transport chain, and this occurs in the thylakoids that we just looked at a moment ago. The light-independent reactions take the ATP and the NADPH generated during the light-dependent reactions, along with carbon dioxide, to produce organic molecules. This is called carbon fixation and occurs through the process of the Calvin cycle. This is a slower reaction than the light-dependent reactions and can happen without light or with light. This takes place in the stroma that we were looking at, that semi-liquid substance that surrounds the thylakoids in the chloroplasts. This diagram illustrates a thylakoid membrane. You see the cutout in the upper right corner. There's some thylakoid discs, and the larger section of this illustration is just an enlargement of the thylakoid membrane. Clusters of pigments arranged in photosystems capture light energy from the sun in the light-dependent reactions. This yields ATP and NADPH. Then in the stroma that surrounds the thylakoids, glucose is synthesized through the Calvin cycle. This illustration just helps you visually prepare for one of the procedures in lab, extracting pigments from different types of leaves and spreading them on chromatography paper. You'll be able to see this one later. And this chloroplast treatment chart explains some of the treatments that will be used in another of the procedures in lab. You might take a look at this, copy it down. You'll be able to see this in lab again. Thanks for coming. That is the end of our presentation.